Hi, I'm Quincas and I'm a synth DIY guy. Welcome to the official video manual for the LXR Drum Eurorack module by Erica Synths and Sonic Potions. This is the Eurorack module version of the standalone LXR02 drum machine, for which I've also made the video manual. This one is actually quite similar. The synthesis engines are pretty much the same, but it doesn't have a sequencer. So you can use any kind of sequencer you like. You can use your clock dividers, Euclidean generators, triggers, and anything else. For this manual, I have connected it to the Erica Synths' own drum sequencer. So as you can see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trigger outputs from the drum sequencer connected to the 7 trigger inputs of the LXR drum. And I also have the accent outputs of the drum sequencer connected to the 6 accent inputs of the LXR drum. But before I get ahead of myself, let's have a look at the user interface here of the LXR drum and just get acquainted with the layout. So basically, as I've already said, up here you have the trigger inputs. These are the audio outputs, which are assignable. 6 accent inputs. Why are there 6 accent inputs, not 7? That's because triggers 6 and 7 are actually open and closed hi-hat. So it's actually the same voice, just with a different decay. Therefore, you only get a single accent output for both of those. And then you also have 5 CV inputs here, which are also freely assignable to any parameter of the voices that you'd like to control via CV. These are the menu buttons. These will select the operating mode of the module. This is the display. Display is used to show the parameter values from the selected menu page. Right now it's in screensaver, but if I turn anything, you start seeing how it displays the information. This is the encoder. It's an endless encoder with push button action. As I choose a parameter, I can then push it to see more detailed information about that parameter. These are 4 endless potentiometers. These will allow you to edit whatever information is visible in the display, right? So you have 4 parameters in the display and 4 encoders here. You can just turn those, right? So there are 2 different ways to enter data. One of them is to push the encoder and use the encoder. The other is to simply use any of the 4 and you directly affect the relevant parameter that lines up with the potentiometer on the screen. These are the select buttons. They allow you to switch the voices and select sound parameter sections. And the way they work is you hold the drum button over here, and this allows you to select which voice you will be editing, right? So voice 1, 2, and 3 are drum voices. 4 is a snare, and you can see that it's written on the panel here, lightly written. This one, number 5, is a clap or cymbal. Number 6 is a close hi-hat, and number 7 is the open hi-hat. And these are not interchangeable. So each voice has separate parameters that are tailored for particular kinds of sounds, right? So the first 3 you can use for bass drums or toms or bells or things like that. The number 4 is for snare drum sounds. 5 is clap or cymbal. 6 and 7 are the hi-hat, closed and open. Right now, once I've chosen a voice to edit, when I let go of the drum button, now pressing these will get me into different pages for sound design and mixing, right, of that particular voice. So for example, if I come over here to the snare voice, you will see that there's no FM, right? Nothing shows up on the screen when I choose FM. So not all of them have everything, but they have what is needed for the particular kind of sound that they're dedicated to. So menu navigation, I've already sort of shown you. The top row of the display will show the short name of the parameter. The bottom row shows the volume of the parameter, and you can change the value using one of the 4 knobs below the display, or you can use the encoder to select the parameter and then push it Now, as you can see, the way it highlights the selected parameter is by capitalizing it. So let's say you want to know what COA means. You can just push it and you see oscillator coarse. So that's the coarse tuning of the oscillator. And once you're in this more detailed page, you can then use the encoder itself to affect that. Now, let's say you don't have a sequencer connected and you want to just hear what the sounds are. You can push perform here, and this allows you to manually play the voices by pushing the buttons on the bottom here. It also gives you a couple of performance-oriented parameters that you can control via these three knobs here. So the first one, what is MRP? Let's see, that's sound morph. Morph is a really cool feature of the LXR. It's also present in the standalone unit, and basically you can have a target kit that you can morph into, right? So what it'll do is it'll gradually change each parameter of the voices from your original selected pattern to the target pattern that you can also select, right? And you can do that with the morph parameter over here. So right now we don't have a target selected, but I'll show you that a little bit later, right? On the standalone unit, you get more functions with the perform. You can do ratcheting and things like that. This one, since it doesn't have a built-in sequencer, it's a voice module. It's limited to just allowing you to manually trigger the voices and do the morphing, select morph target. So this is your, as you can see, sound morph target. That's which kit it'll morph into. And by the way, if you want to make a subtle change, what you can do is create a new pattern which is just slightly different from your original pattern, save it, and then select that as a target, and then you can make a subtle change using the morphing parameter, right? And this third parameter here is a sample rate reducer, right? So this will do sort of a what some people call bit crushing, but it's actually sample rate reduction. See? Very cool, right? All right. So you're in edit. If you want to edit the voices, create your sounds, design the sounds, go to perform if you want to play around. Also, if you have a sequence like this, you can use these parameters. Like let's set a target here and then morph to it. Right. And it's cool that you can find these intermediary positions that are in between your two kits, right? And now I'm back to the original. And here's the sample rate reduction. And I can do a little manual fills too. I can stop the sequencer and just trigger things manually, and so on. As you can already hear, there are some effects in there. We can hear some delay, but yeah, we'll get there in due time. Now over here you have the modulation button, and this is where you can set modulation destinations for the CV inputs, as well as some internal modulation things. For example, you can set what the accent changes. It's set to by default modulate the amplitude or the volume of each voice, so it'll just make that voice a little louder when you send a trigger, but you can also have it change other things as well, right? This is the effects page. We'll get to it in more detail in a little bit. This is the shift key, which is just used to access extra functions of different keys, right? And then you have save load, which is basically just kits here, since you don't save patterns, right? This is, again, not a sequencer. So right now I have some kits loaded in here that Erica Synths has sent me. These will be included in the factory units. And so here's Lambo. Here's Reservoir. Right, so once you choose the one you want, you can push in the encoder to load it, right? This one's called faders. Very nice. Here's malware. Here's zipper. Oh, this one's super nice. Cool. So let's say we make some changes to this one. Okay, so we're gonna choose this kick drum over here, and now I'm gonna use my sequencer to trigger, because since I'm editing, I don't want to go to perform to play and then back to edit. So what I can do, for example, is change the chorus tuning of that kick drum. Right? Now if I want to change something about this drum over here, I have to choose drum, select it, right? And now I can change parameters about it. Here's pulse width modulation instead of noise. That's pretty cool, right? And now let's maybe change something about the snare voice. A little more drive. Open up the filter frequency. So let's say I like this new kit, right? What I can do is now, instead of load, I can just push the button again, the save load button, and now it's set to save, and I can choose a slot that is empty, any of these that say init kit, right? And it's going to ask me if I want to edit the name. So the first time that I save it, I probably will edit the name so that I can differentiate it from the original kit. But when I'm just making changes to a kit, then I'll probably won't edit the name. I'll just save it with the same name. So for now, yeah, we will choose yes. So I can do this rather quickly if I use these two, right? Number 1 and number 3, or just the data and number 3, or even just the data. It's a little bit more controlled since it's a clicky encoder, whereas these are continuous. So with the clicky encoder, really each click will represent a letter and so on. And once you like what you have, you can just keep moving the data encoder until you see this little arrow pointing to OK. Press OK, and it's successfully saved that kit. If there are more than 4 entries for a particular menu, such as this one, for example, you will see a little arrow in the end. Right? This indicates that there are more parameters, and what you can do is keep moving the encoder, and then you will see those parameters. You will also see the arrow pointing that way to indicate that there are more parameters this way over here. Another way to toggle the second page is to simply press the same button again. So if I press the oscillator button again, I get that second page. Right? So there are 2 ways to access the second page of any particular menu, right? So for example, here in mix, you also get the little arrow indicating that there's more. So I can push the mix button again, and we see the output routing shows up over there. I can push it again, go back, or I can move the encoder to cycle through. So as you can see, there are multiple ways to do things in the LXR, which will be convenient in different circumstances and situations or preferences. And again, you can always push the encoder to see a more detailed version of the parameter. And it's also good for a more fine tuning in case the knobs over here are a little too coarse. You want to have a finer control, then you can do that. Go into the detail page of one particular parameter and use the encoder to change it. And then you can just press the encoder again to get back out. Or if you're in there and you just move any one of these encoders, the 4 ones over here, it'll get you back out to the overview of the menu as well, right? Okay, so let's go to perform in here. These super cool voices. This thing sounds so nice. Now a word about memory management. The SD card is used as non-volatile memory, so you do need to have one in there, or you won't be able to save your work. In fact, you won't even be able to load any kits if you don't have a card in there. Luckily, there's one included. Even comes with some cool kits and plenty of extra space for you to create your own. So let's have a look at each drum voice and what it offers, right? So we're gonna go back to the edit over here and use the drum button to select drum number 1. And remember, 1, 2, and 3 are identical, so they can be used for kicks and such. So the first parameter we get here on the oscillator menu is the coarse tuning, right? So this allows you to just tune the central pitch of that oscillator. You also get a fine control in case you want to tune to a particular note. Here's the waveform selector. So right now we're using a sine wave, but you can go to a triangle, to a saw, rectangle, noise. But in the pulse width modulation, right now we had a 0 PWM, which is why we are not hearing anything. So here I can set the pulse width of the pulse wave. So it says pulse width M, PWM, but it's actually PW, right? It's a pulse wave, and this is the pulse width, right? Modulation would actually be in the modulation page. This is one of the modulation targets, one of the possible modulation targets. Very cool. Now, as we can see, there's no little arrow, so there are no further parameters to be edited in this page. You know what? I think I'm gonna move my selfie cam. Edgar will be sure to edit this out. So as I was saying, you can fine-tune the oscillator this way, right? And then press the encoder again to come out. So yeah, so this is what our kick is sounding like. A little high. Let's bring it down a little bit. Okay. Now over here we have the AEG menu, right? Which is amplitude envelope generator. So it gives us an attack. So as you can see, now the volume is ramping up. Or we can have a sharp attack. Not a shark attack, a sharp attack. Here's the decay. That's the decay length, and the decay slope, which is the curve, right? From exponential through linear to logarithmic. Very well. Moving on to the modulation menu. Here we have an envelope generator for the pitch, right? So, for example, the modulation parameter here sets how much. So if I turn it to 0, we get no pitch envelope, right? If I add to it, then this is the modulation amount, right? And here's the decay. And the slope again. So this is basically a separate envelope generator with just decay and slope parameters for the pitch of the oscillator, right? And over here we have volume on and off. Now this parameter over here, this is just a toggle, so it's either on and off. And this just means that the accent will control the volume of the voice. So if I send an accent to this particular voice, then it'll sound a little louder. If you don't want that, you just turn this parameter to off. Let's move on to the FM parameter. So this is frequency modulation. It is a second oscillator that can modulate the first, right? So let's listen to this. The amount right now is at 0, which means there is no frequency modulation happening at all. You can change the mode. Right now it's FM, but there's a mode called mix where you hear both oscillators together, not modulating each other, just mixed together, see? So you can do kind of a bichord kind of a thing. The amount becomes then the volume of the second oscillator that you can mix into the first one. Let's go back to FM here. Very cool. Now the click parameter is a transient generator of sorts, and it has a collection of waveforms saved there in the memory, which actually come from samples. So the LXR drum does not allow you to load samples, and it doesn't sample, but it does have this parameter here, the click menu, that lets you add some preset samples to the transient, to the very attack portion of your sound. Now these will work better in different contexts for different voices with different kind of programming. Right now we have a lot of filtering going on. So in fact, why don't we go to the filter parameter, have a look at what this does. You have a drive, you have a type of selector, high pass, low pass, band pass, unity gain band pass, notch, peak, low pass 2, and off. Let's leave it in off for now and go back to click, and now I think we'll hear these transient sounds way better. There we go. See? Let's go back to the first one. Snap. Offset. Offset just creates a click by offsetting the zero crossing so that the waveform is starting not on 0. Gives you that little click, right? This is click. This is click 2. This is tick. Yeah, now we can really hear it without the filtering. Here's the kick. This just adds that like snappiness from the beater hitting the drum head. Right. Here's rim. Cool. Very useful for rim knock sounds for the snare drum. Here's the drop sound. It's got a little bit of a pitch envelope. Probably good for toms and things like that. Here's the hat. So this alone can serve as a hi-hat, even if you don't do anything else with the hi-hat voice. Here's clap. Yeah, this is the one that has multiple transients. Like multiple hands clapping, right? And since it's a sample, it does sound very lo-fi when you bring it down low on the frequency, which is cool. Here's kick 2. Little aliasing here on the 0, which is nice. Alright. Snare. Yeah, it's a bit of a snare sample. Very short one. Tom. Yeah, let's just give a tom a nice attack. SP2. And that's it. Those are all the clicks available. Right now, back to filter. First, let's bring our oscillator back up. Right? Now, back to filter here. It's in off right now, but we can put it, for example, in... yeah, it's lovely how many options we have here. This is quite deep for sound design. You can add resonance to it, right? And set the cutoff frequency over here. Again, if I want to do a fine tune of that, I can just push in the encoder and move them one at a time. Yeah, click one value at a time here. Push it again. Very nice. Bring the resonance down. Let's change the filter type. This peak sounds good. Now, once you've set the filter how you like it, you can then add drive to it. You can make it quite more aggressive. It gives it a lot more harmonics, so it'll cut through a mix. I like that right there. This is a very nice kick drum I've just designed. right? Now let's see what else we can do with voice number 2. So I'm going to select voice number 2 here by holding the drum key, right? I can go back to tap over here and just hit this. And let's quickly play around, right? Let's go to oscillator here. Fine tune, waveform. I just changed it to saw. Let's check out the filter. Now I can jump around instead of doing things in order, right? Sometimes it makes more sense. That's pretty cool. Now, mix parameter. The mix parameter is like a mixer channel, right? So you can control the volume of the voice relative to the others. You can pan it left or right, see? Or center. You can do a sample rate reduction just for this voice, right? You do have the global sample rate reduction in the performance page, but this will do it for just this one voice. And you have a drive parameter that's independent of the filter drive, right? Now, as you can see, there's a little arrow there. You can keep moving, and the next parameter is the output. And as you can see, it's routed to the effects portion, which is why we hear a delay. If I change this, I can send it to either a stereo output, which like stereo 1, which is output 1 and 2 here. They're going into stereo input of my black output module, right? So now if I go back to panning, you really hear that panning more clearly because it's not clouded by the delay. Now I can also just send it to a separate output, left 1, right 1, left 2, right 2, and back to effects, right? There you go. Let's say I like this already. Let's program something. There you go. And now as it's sounding without my need to manually play it, I can change some more parameters about it. Maybe add some FM here. Let's give it a click. Open up the filter some. Maybe we want the sound to be a little shorter. Yeah, and I don't want it to be in the effects anymore, so I'm going to send it to stereo 1. And I want it to be panned a little bit further left. Cool. So now let's go to voice number 3 and let's see what we can quickly come up with. So looks like this has some FM already in there, see? That's kind of cool. Let's get it out of effects too for now. We'll put it on stereo 1. And by the way, you have 4 outputs, which is really cool because you can, for example, assign your kick drum to a specific output and then send it to processing in your modular to an external effects processor, to maybe a filter, maybe a drive, anything you'd want to use for that particular voice. So that's what's so cool about this routing over here. You can just send it to the main stereo mix or to a second stereo mix, or you can just have the extra 2 outputs be mono outputs. I personally like to use an output for kick, an output for snare, and the remaining 2 outputs for the stereo mix of everything else. And that way I can record it in my DAW and have more flexibility to mix in the end. Just be able to, you know, EQ that kick drum, maybe send it to a side chain, and maybe have different effects on the snare. So yeah, I usually use the 4 outputs that way: kick, snare, and stereo, which is actually how I record acoustic drums as well. I usually just use 4 microphones, 1 in the kick, 1 in the snare, and a pair stereo overheads. So this can mimic that kind of a thing. So all right, let me give it a click. Yeah, that's snappy. The snap is nice. And make it shorter as well. So we got these two little short ones. Now since one is on the left side, we might want to pan this one to the right, right? So we can play around with both of them like that. So let's maybe record. That's cool right there. All right, so we have voice 3. Now, this is the first of the different voices, the snare voice. Hold drum, hit snare, and again, it's going to the effects. Let's send it to stereo 1, or we can also send it to output 3, which is left 2, right? And that's this over here. And this gives me a manual control for panning, separate control for volume, which is nice to have, right? Okay. Wave is selected as noise. Let's choose saw wave here. All right, let's go back here. The mix then will mix between this noise and that saw, right? Now here's something interesting about the snare voice. You have something called repeat here. It's like a little ratchet for the beginning, for the attack stage. So with the attack on 0, you're not really going to hear anything, but if I turn the attack higher, now you get those 8 repeats crammed into the attack time, right? So right now it's fast. But if let's make the decay fast here, the slope as well. As you can see, we're getting those 8 hits crammed in there. If I make the attack longer, see, interesting. So you can even do like some interesting ratchet effects. And you can modulate this parameter externally. So there's really interesting things that you can do with this, right? Or I can just have like 3 and really fast. And that gives you that little crunch, which you use for normally for a snap or clap sound, but you have it here for the snare as well. Let's bring this pitch lower, make it a lower sounding snare. There we go. Alright, we're getting somewhere. Maybe we want a little longer decay. Cool. Now we can filter this if we want. I don't think a low pass is gonna be the best for this. Maybe like the peak or the notch. Some resonance. There we go. That's without drive. Oh yeah. The drive is also drowning out the resonance a bit. Okay, a little less. There we go. Now slope of 0 gives you just this little blip, and a slope of 1 gives you this very interesting effect, which is almost like a reverb, like you get that initial attack and then just a tail, which is nice too. 2 is good. So let's program that in. Now since this is on a separate output, I have a separate volume control for it over here. if I go back to mix over here, I can tell it to go back to the main mix here. And then pan it back to center. Sample rate reduction. Kinda nice. Now it feels like there's a slight delay on the sound, right? Well, you need to bet that's the attack. Right here. If we set the attack fast, there it is. So let's just set the attack not as slow as it was. So we can still get those repeats in there. What you can do is, if you want that, but you want maybe the snare to ramp and peak at the note, you can erase them from here and right, and actually trigger it before, and then use the attack parameter. Right, so it rolls into it. There you go. That's nice right there. Attack of 30 with 3 repeats, triggering one step before where you actually want it to hit. Super cool. Let's make this a little faster. Let's go back to sending it to left 2 here, so that I can have that manual control of the volume. Very cool. Right, now let's have a look at voice number 5, which is the clap cymbal voice, right? And that's over here. And right now it's just that sort of little click there. As you can see, there was nearly no decay. So now we can make it a little bit more present there, and I can already tell this is using noise. This is the waveform, but we can use, let's say, a saw wave, bring down the pitch here, and add some. Now this one has more complex FM, right? So you have frequency 1, frequency 2, gain 1, gain 2. This allows you to, and there's even a little arrow there, so you can get, yeah, this is where you can set the waveforms for both FM sources. So let's make them both saws. And yeah, this is oscillator waveform. So you have 2 oscillators for FMing on this particular voice, right? Allows you to make more complex things. Very percussive. Here's the frequencies and the gains. You get some very interesting sounds that way. Now here, the modulation, all you get is that on and off for the accent, and it's on. Sine wave. Some more bell-like things. Very interesting. Amplitude envelope here. There's a slope. And this one also has those repeats, see? So I can have that little initial roll or ratchet. Also, here we can really hear these transients. There's that clap there. That's pretty cool. Why don't we program something there? We want more volume. Pan it a bit. As you can hear, I'm using accents to give it a little bit of volume variation between hits. And finally, let's do some hi-hats. So drum, closed hi-hat, and step here. This is our hi-hat. So an oscillator, again I have the pitch here, coarse pitch, fine pitch, waveform if I want noise, or a rectangle. This is kind of cool. We have attack, decay, slope. Modulation again only gives you on and off for the accenting. And here's plenty of FM options. Same as the previous voice, actually. Now, as it plays, we can play around with it. And now finally, the open hi-hat is basically the same, but you have a different parameter, which is the envelope. And that's this over here. So we have this guy, and you see it replicates all of the parameters, but you can have a longer decay for this one and a different slope. So I have this short one here, and the long one here. So let's program some open hi-hats here. And yes, they will be in like a mute group, right? So they won't sound together. There's actually the same voice. You're just applying a different decay and slope and attack. So yeah, and now I really like this kit. I'm attached to it already because I made it in front of you people, and so I'm gonna save it. So let's press the save load button twice. So let's save this, and yeah, I'm just gonna save it over that one that I made originally. Push in the data encoder, and no, I'm not gonna edit the name, and success. Very cool. Cool. Now I want to show you the morphing feature a little more in depth. So let's just load a different kit for now. As you can see, they have numbers, right? The kits have numbers. So let's choose nanobyte. And there's no indication that it's been loaded, but it has. As you play, if you press play here, you'll notice. All right, cool. Now we'll go to the perform over here and choose a target kit, right? So maybe we can go back to the load here just to see one that we might want. Penalty is nice, or space D. Yeah, space D is cool. Dial up is nice. So dial up is 12. Let's go back to nanobyte, that's 5. Now let's go again to the perform. And we'll choose morph target 12. Right? Now I can use this knob over here. Right? And at 255, it's now the other kit, number 12. Dial up it was called. Now what's cool about this is the intermediary positions. Basically, it's like a completely new kit, because what it's doing is not an audio crossfade. It's actually converging the parameters proportionally from one kit to the next. So cool. So besides this, another thing I wanted to show you is the modulation matrix. So if I come to mod over here, we have 3 parameters. They will apply to the selected voice. So let's say that we want to do something to the kick drum. We want to modulate the pitch of the kick drum, perhaps. Okay. So now as the source, it's already set to CV1, but I can change it. It can be one of 5 CVs. It can be one of 4. Hold on, 6 LFOs, or it can be any accent input at all, right? You would probably choose accent 1 since we're affecting the kick drum, right? Now the amount of modulation is the second parameter here, and the destination. Now why don't we set the destination to be coarse pitch, right? And now let's see what the accent does to the coarse pitch. So now we have 2 separate notes for the kick. Cool, huh? And it looks like the amount is in half steps, because this is the octave, I think. Yep, it is indeed. Cool. It can also be the amount of modulation. So that's how much of that pitch envelope, right? Cool. Let's do something else. This sound over here, this is getting a little repetitive and annoying. Why don't we send some modulation to this one? We'll go to modulation matrix, we'll select that voice, right? And we'll choose CV1 as the source. And I'm going to connect my joystick, black joystick here, right? The x-axis to CV1. And we'll give it some amount. And we'll choose maybe fine tune as the destination. Or instead of fine, we will go to coarse. Well, I can just use the sequencer here, it'll be easier. Wow, that's cool. That's awesome. Yeah, we just needed a more radical change. Right, so I can record on this joystick. It won't sync, but that's even cooler because you will get a different pattern at every cycle. So let's record a joystick movement here. Cool. So now we have a chaotic modulation of the pitch of voice number 3 using the CV input here. Now you have 3 of these. Press the button again, you get another one. If you press the mod button, you get a second modulation setup, right, for that same voice. Let's choose an internal LFO, right, LFO 1, and give it some amount. And what will we affect with this one? How about the cutoff frequency of the filter? Or the amount of drive, perhaps. But how do we set the LFO speed? That's where the shift comes in. First time we get to use the shift, and that's shift mod, right? And we have the frequency right there. There's an offset, waveform, sine, and retrigger options here. V1, voice 1, 2. So it'll retrigger along with any of these voices, or we can leave it off to have it free flowing, right? So if you use the retrigger, you can actually use this as an additional envelope too. Yeah, I can really hear that LFO there. Right, and what is it affecting? No, that's the first one. This is the second one over here. It's the drive setting where we can hear the panning. Cool. So it's giving us an auto pan. Let's go back to the LFO speed here. Is that the wrong LFO? Right, so this is how we can select the LFO by using the drum. If you're in LFO mode, use the drum key, and you can choose the LFO that you want to affect the frequency of. Right. So now we're getting a slower auto pan here. Right. Yeah, I was wondering about that. How do you choose which of the 6 LFOs you're setting the speed? That's how you hold drum. You might feel like you're changing which voice you're editing, but you're not. You're just changing which LFO you're editing. Oh, and there's the third one. Why not just use LFO 2? LFO 2 for this. Boom. And what destination? Let's come close up. Let's open up the detailed menu here. Oscillator waveform, pulse width, attack, decay, maybe the filter cutoff now, frequency. Let's press play here. Now let's go to edit here, go to voice 3 and look at that filter. If we could raise the resonance and change it to a low pass, we'll hear more of that LFO. Alright, let's go back to the mod matrix now, and it's LFO 2. We can give it more amount or less. Or we could change it to the drive, I don't know. No, let's leave it frequency. Now let's go to, let's just hear that voice. Is it really affecting the filter? I don't really hear that too much. But let's go over here to LFO, and we're going to choose LFO 2. Right, and that's we have the speed here for that LFO. Oh, it's random. Random is cool. So that means we can randomize many parameters in this thing. But we'll use the sine wave and no retrigger for now, and give it a frequency. Yeah, I can hear it now. Let's go back to edit. We want to do it to voice 3, and we'll filter. Definitely hear it now, right? Let's play. Raise that frequency a bit. Alright, so yeah, that's how you assign modulation to any parameter pretty much of any voice by using the mod matrix. And the way you access the internal LFOs is with shift mod. You can then choose which of the internal LFOs you want to control, you want to set up holding drum and choosing one of the 8 buttons. Now that's almost it, we're almost done. Let's have a look at the effects. See, this kit already has effects going on, so let's go see what's going on there. I just clicked on effects, and if we click on the mix here, you can already see that the output is routed to the effects. Now let's go into the effects window. Type right here says delay, right? And we already knew that. Sounds like a delay. And now the second parameter here is where that effect is going to. So right now we're sending it to the stereo output number 1, right? But we could also, if we wanted to, have the effects coming out of any output at all, or either mono or stereo, right? You can change this again, just like you can with the output of any channel, of any voice, right? Now this is dry wet over here, DW. Dry wet. If you have any doubts, you can always click to have a more detailed view of each parameter, right? So I can have it more of that delay present. And here's the type. And PP. PP is ping pong, of course. And delay. So there's just these two. So let's go back and change the dry wet. This is super nice right here. Super cool. Now, as you can see, again, there's a little arrow over here. That means there are more parameters you can edit. So we can move over. And over here, what's TIM? That's affects time, right? So make it slower. And this is nice, it's got a filtering, so it definitely sounds like a tape delay. the tape delay effect. Right? You can make it super fast too. Like Carpus Strong fast. Ah, that's interesting. You can do this, you can get a tone out of it. And if you give it more ring, is that what this is? Range, no, range. What does the range do? Oh, right, it just gives you more. More range of time variation, right? Let's go to tone. That has to do with the filtering for sure. Nice, so many parameters. And feedback. We can add feedback to get a ring here. And now we're doing straight up Carpus Strong. All right, so if I change the time, I get different notes. Hey Sonic Potions, let us assign CV inputs to effects parameters. That would be so cool. Can we do that? Amount. There it is. Oh yeah, of course you can. Parameter 1 of the delay, and we're doing Carpus Strong. By the way, one of the destinations is volt per octave, so you can actually send your keyboard or whatever, your sequencer, to play notes with the voice that you're editing in the mod matrix. Forgot to mention that when we were back there talking about the mod matrix. Ah, that would be cool to show an example of too, wouldn't it? But first let's finish looking at the different effects. Let's change the time. Very cool. Right, so let's see what other effects are there. Let's just leave the whole beat and let's check out different effects types. We got delay, here's compressor. Whoa, so here's the dry wet, here's the ratio. Here's the attack, decay, threshold, and gain. Cool. Is everybody going? Let's see. 1. Oh, voice 1 isn't. Voice 2 is. Voice 3 is. So everything but the kick. Alright, no, the clap isn't either. So what happens if we send everybody to effects here and just get this massive everything compressed? Cool. Go back to the effects here. Cool drive, man. Let's see. Dry wet. The type of drive. Fold. So this is tube. or less. It's tube saturation. This one is folding. This is flipping. And that's it. Looks like those are the types you get. 2, fold, clip. Let's leave it in 2. 2 is nice. A little bit wetter? No. That's good. Amount of drive. Doesn't seem to be affecting it. I think this one's probably for a different kind. Here's color. So make it darker. Tone. Yeah, tone is really making it darker. Very cool. Another effect type, ring modulator. Nice. Waveform, dry wet, frequency of the oscillator, internal oscillator. Cool. All right, next. Effects type. So we've been to off, drive, ring modulator, compressor, delay, and that's it. Super cool. So that's the effects you get for now. You never know what these guys will come up with for the next firmware update. But I'm already pretty happy. And the way that you can assign things internally, the mod matrix, you get 3 different sources and destinations per voice, and 6 voice drum synthesizer for Eurorack. Don't know of another this badass. Yeah, so let's just connect the keyboard here and check out the volt per octave response. So let's say you just want to use one of these voices. I mean, sure, you can incorporate into the sequence and everything, but I'm actually curious to see, for example, how it can be to just use it as a melodic synthesizer. I'm going to connect voice 1 here and take gate. There it is. And pitch. Now we need to assign the pitch, which is input CV input 2, to volt per octave, right, of drum voice 1. So let's go to mod matrix, and we've already selected voice 1. We want the source to be CV2. We want the amounts to be 100%. Actually, let's do it this way, it's faster. And we want the destination to be, there it is, it's the first thing. So I turned it all the way to off. And then the first one is 1 volt per octave. So let's do a couple of things to the voice to make it a little more useful as a bass voice. I'm going to go to edit and going to change the course to 0, course tune, and on the modulation here we're going to take out the modulation amount, so no pitch envelope at all. Very cool. There's no sustain, right? So it doesn't matter how long you hold the note for. These are trigger inputs. So if you wanted a longer note, you'd increase the decay and play with the slope. Response to pitch shift. Now let's have a look at, for example, a filter could be something that you can modulate with the velocity or the mod wheel. So I can send a mod wheel output to CV input 3, and we're going to affect the frequency of the filter, right? So we've already assigned CV2. Let's assign CV3, right? CV3, a good amount. And in destination, we're going to choose the filter frequency. This is my mod wheel here. Oh, it's at the very edge. Let me get it a little closer. See how it lights up. So I can control the filter. If I synchronize them, right, I can either use the drum gates from the KeyStep Pro directly to the sonic potions, which is super cool, or I can synchronize the drum sequencer to the KeyStep Pro and continue using the drum sequencer for the drums and only use the KeyStep Pro for the melodic stuff. Or I can even program the melodic stuff right here on the drum sequencer itself, because it does have a CV output over here. I could have used that instead of pulling out the keyboard, but it's nice to see that it works with different gear as well. So yeah, I think this is it. I'm probably going to make another video where I'm jamming out more. This was really more of a manual and the review of all its features, and more of, you know, like an in-depth look at everything that you can do with it. And yeah, I'll be sure to make another video where I'm just jamming out and making cool music with this thing, because it's very inspiring, sounds amazing, very flexible, super cool idea by Erica Synths and Sonic Potions to make a brain for Eurorack based on their LXR O2 drum machine. Alright, see you soon and stay noisy.